SaGa Emerald Beyond is the latest masterpiece from Square in their long-running series that began all the way back in the 1980s. But many of these games are notoriously difficult to get into, and unfortunately, this one here is no exception. So here, I want to share with y'all a combat guide, along with like 8 hints and tips that I learned during my playthrough of the game that I wish that I knew from the get-go, because it would have helped me have such a more enjoyable experience. Hi there everybody, my name is David, and if you are new to the channel, please be sure that you subscribe for some more top 10s, news, and reviews, and also smash that like button to show your love. Now, let's go ahead and get into this great game, sharing all these hints and tips. With our first tip, we have choose your hero wisely. There are 5 main stories to choose from here, but as far as difficulty is concerned, not all of them are created equally. So I just want to give you like a brief overview of what each story is about, as well as my personal thoughts on how beginner-friendly they each are. I want to say that Tsudanori's quest is probably the most beginner-friendly. He's what's known as a Kagatsu Puppet Master, which means that he's able to control sentient puppets through combat, and he is immediately given a party full of puppets, and then able to go to a small number of conjoined worlds at first, so that you're not too overwhelmed. The second most friendly is probably Bonnie and Fermina's, as they similarly get a party full of monsters, but just a tad bit more worlds to explore at first. On the middle ground, there's Amaya, who gets more of a variety of party members from the get-go before she heads off to the conjoined worlds, and then there's Diva number 5, who gets quite a bit of variety of different races to join up with her that you can play around with, and then whenever she does go to the conjoined worlds, she gets a ton of them to go to, so she could be a tad bit overwhelming. But easily the hardest is the Vampire King Cygnus, who does get a full party right from the get-go, but he's also thrust into some very difficult battles right at the start too. So I would just personally recommend saving his journey until you have a little bit more combat experience. And let's talk about combat now. Number 2, keep always comboing. Well, you might think that the combat is just your typical turn-based affair. There is a lot more here, because comboing really is the name of the game. You really need to utilize the turn order gauge at the bottom of the screen, and then pick and choose a variety of attacks in order to move your characters next to one another, and then get their position just right, so that the green parallelograms underneath them connect, and in doing so, they'll all combine their attacks. And if you get that combo meter up to 200%, then you'll hit overdrive, and you'll get a whole other round of hits in. But at the same token, if you have one character that's much further away from all the other characters and monsters, then they'll get their own little combo themselves called a showstopper, where they do a wave of attacks against the enemies. But do be warned, because this works both ways. If the enemies are next to one another, they can pull off a combo too. So sometimes the best bet is to take a character out of the combo and instead place them between the enemies so that the enemies can't get the combination of attacks off. Number 3, upgrade your equipment. In battle, sometimes you'll encounter stones or boxes or other various obstacles rather than enemies. And while you don't have to defeat them in order to win the battle, if you do defeat them, you'll get some rare materials which could be helpful for upgrading your equipment. But also, you'll still receive crafting items for just defeating regular monsters, as well as various pieces of equipment. And please do not ignore this, because there is no other way to upgrade your equipment besides using the crafting. Going into the crafting is as simple as just opening up the menu and seeing if you have the requisite items, and then upgrading your pieces of equipment in order to power up your party. Number 4, do not forget about roles and formations. Speaking of powering up, you've got to figure out your positioning too. Party formations affect the entire battle lineup, whereas roles are individually equipped. And while some roles are pretty much universal, such as those that raise up LP after each battle, many others are unique to specific characters or races. You can almost think of roles as enhanced accessories, because rather than raising stats, they actually change the way that a character fights. They might increase your critical hit rate, increase status resistances, or raise your combo rate. There's a ton of them, and mixing and matching them is the key to victory. Number 5, read all the races. There are a ton of different races here, and each of them powered up slightly differently from one another, so I do want to discuss them all in detail. Humans can use almost any piece of equipment and learn new techniques via the glimmer system, which just randomly teaches them a skill based on similar attacks that they've already been using. The Kagatsu are similar to humans, but they can only equip one weapon, not 2, and they can't glimmer text. Instead, they copy text with a mimic ability. Not only that, but they can also equip souls from defeated enemies and then use monster-type techs themselves. The monster race can only equip accessories and they can't glimmer, but once they do kill an enemy, they'll absorb their techniques to use them themselves, but they can only absorb one tech at a time. So if you want to free up space and learn another in its place, just use it in battle, and in doing so, you will lose some of their maximum HP, but the tech will be powered up. Ephemerals grow through battling, and they'll evolve from juveniles all the way up to elders. With each growth, their stats will increase, but their maximum LP will decrease. Then, when they eventually die, they'll become reborn, passing down their techs in the next generation. After that, we have the robots or the mechs, who don't increase their strength in combat with the other races. Instead, their abilities and available techniques are determined by the equipment that they have on. And then finally, there's the vampires, which is pretty much just Cygnus. Similar to humans, he can use most equipment and learn abilities through glimmering, but he also has access to special sanguine arts that consume LP by draining the blood of his party members. Whenever he does this, he increases his own maximum LP, and then he learns additional sanguine arts. Number 6. It's a world of weapons out there. In the same way that there's like a ton of different races, there's even more weapons to deal with here. So let's get started talking about them. Long swords, short swords, daggers, and axes make up the family of single-handed blades. Long swords allow you to move quickly, short swords feature a wide variety of elemental attacks, and then daggers make it less likely that you'll be targeted, while axes feature higher attack power in exchange for lower accuracy. The two-handed sword family will make you more likely to be targeted by enemies, but the great swords have slashing, piercing, and blunt-based attacks, which make it pretty easy to target some enemy weaknesses, while katanas deal with conditional techs, and then pole arms can slow down enemy actions. Two-handed guns all feature anti-flying properties, but similar to the two-handed swords, if you do have these equipped, you'll be more likely to be attacked by the enemies. Many of these guns can also inflict elemental damages, as well as status ailments, and they delay the character's actions on the timeline. Whenever you don't have anything at all equipped, you can utilize martial arts. Punching techs make it easier to evade attacks, and kicks tend to appear more quickly in the action order, while tackles delay the user's order of action on the timeline. And while they're not the most powerful thing ever, because of the way that they do manipulate the timeline, they are helpful in setting up combos. And then finally, there's the one-handed gun, which is very effective against flying enemies, and it also lets you learn a ton of conditional techs. But what are conditional techs? Let's talk about those now in number 7. Conditional techs do pretty much just what they sound like. They only activate on the condition or response to an enemy or ally's attacks. And if an enemy is going to be using them, then you'll notice them in the timeline showing up as like 3 different question marks. So if you see that, you're going to want to use an attack with the quell characteristic in order to get rid of them. Interrupts are used in response to attacks of particular elements, so if you see an enemy using like a fire technique, you might want to interrupt it. Counterattacks nullify an enemy's action while also dealing damage in return. Protect allows for another character to take damage for an injured party member, and if you use one whenever an enemy attacks the whole party, it can also reduce the amount of allies that end up taking damage. A chain attack is kind of like a follow-up to an ally's action, allowing them to move higher up in the turn order, but do be aware that chains will also break the flow of a united attack. And then finally, there's Pursuit, which takes place after an enemy's action, making it pretty easy to disrupt enemies' united attacks. Always study under Mr. S. Now we get to discuss our little friend Mr. S all the way back from Final Fantasy Legend 2. After your chosen hero completes their first world, you'll find him there in the Celestial Realm, and here he will give you his trials and challenges, most of which are tied to how well you do in combat. Whenever you complete his trials, you'll gain crafting items, and you can even go up in rank and then unlock more trials. Tutelage, though, allows the party members who are not in the current battle lineup to develop additional abilities such as extra HP, better weapon skills, or even learn spells, so it's a great way for your out-of-battle party members to continue their training. And thankfully, you don't have to go back into the Celestial Realm to find him. He's just gonna appear in the menu, so just make sure that you're always attempting a new trial whenever you're battling with Mr. S. SaGa Emerald Beyond can be kind of a behemoth of a game, and there is a lot going on here, but hopefully these 8 hints and tips will help you get the most enjoyable experience out of this newest masterpiece from Square. But I gotta know, what hints and tips would you like to share with me Let me know in the comments, and let's get a discussion going on here, and let's all talk and chat about it. And if you like what I do here on my channel, please head on over to the Patreon to sign up for early access to my videos, as well as behind-the-scenes photographs. The link to it is over in the video description. And as always, please like, comment, and subscribe, and have a good day.